So what are some of the approaches we can take to, like, actually when we are sort of in the interview and we're asked a problem, like sort of can we actually create a sort of a good process to tackling this problem, right? Um, in a lot of interviews, what I've seen when I ask candidates problems is like they just assume that the problem meant something without even trying to understand the problem. So the first thing I look for is, does the candidate ask the right questions if I give him sort of a more open-ended problem, right? Does the candidate try to resolve ambiguity? Does the candidate state the assumptions, right? The next thing that you basically want to do after you've really understood the problem and you've sort of noted your assumptions down is, do you design an algorithm, right? Or do you just start, right, writing code on the board, right? So what my recommendation is, design an algorithm, come up with some quick pseudocode, express the computational and space complexity without being prodded for it, right? And then write the code, right? So what you've done sort of with this approach is you've basically, you know, kind of checked in with your interviewer to see his expectation and made sure that your algorithm actually meets the expectation, and then you basically go and write the code. And finally, after you write the code, do you actually test your code to see if it works, right? Do you run through some example cases to see if it actually works? A lot of candidates, they'll just write the code and they'll say, yeah, this will work, but there will be basically edge conditions that basically it will not work for, and they tell me, oh, they're very confident this will work. So what I'm looking for is, even after you write code that you're highly confident in, do you actually sort of write test cases for it and validate that it works? So what are some of the patterns that we can basically, develop in terms of problem solving, right? I think uh, more and more practice, there's this old age adage that says practice makes perfect. So the more you practice, I think the better you will become. So, and sort of the more diverse set of problems you see, the more sort of intuitively you'll be able to solve problems, right? Just for an example, right, if you need to look up something very quickly from a data store that you need to keep in memory, right? Traditionally, a hash table would probably make the best sense in terms of doing that, right? So the fact that, you've seen a lot of problems of that same class that use hash tables, right? So you see a new problem that uh, requires you to do the same, you immediately sort of come up with a hash table, right? So, the more basically you expose yourself to a wide variety of classic problems, the better you become in intuitively being very quick in terms of selecting the right data structure to solve the problem, right? So whiteboarding, once again, very important, right? And collaboration, right? So, definitely mock interviews are probably the best thing you can do in terms of improving or getting a good idea or getting a good gauge of how you're doing.